Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Lowell Lodestar's Drilling Deeper webinar for October. And in particular, welcome to our very special guest, Rob Waugh. Good morning, Rob.
Morning, John. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
Great to have you. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our guest this morning. Fantastic to have you on. As usual, we'll have three parts to the webinar. It'll be initially just a brief few minutes from myself talking about the market. And this month, I want to talk about the famous Lassonde curve and get Rob's input onto that as well. Then we'll get into the actual main substance of the webinar and hand over to Rob. And Rob will talk about his career, and then he'll hopefully get a few minutes to talk about what he's up to today. And then I promise we're going to have Q&A this month. So we've already got a couple of questions coming in, which we'll definitely try and get to. So this is the famous Lassonde curve. Many people would be familiar with this, moving through the life cycle or the hopeful life cycle of a typical resources stock, from exploration through discovery, through hopefully making that discovery bigger and better through drilling. And that's that first peak there you see through time. And then companies may typically hit this valley of death, which is a pretty bad term, but the orphan period where they need to grapple with three things: work on feasibility, working on finance, and working on permitting. And those things are not generally as exciting as making the initial discovery, and often the share price will drift down before hopefully the company moves through into project development and production and get into cash flow. But what I think we're seeing now, and we have heard the word boom in the last few weeks, the market has turned on a sixpence, and we're certainly seeing a lot better valuations being attracted by parts of the market. And I think the shape of the Lassonde curve actually may be changing somewhat, and it may be flattening out, particularly that valley of death period may not be, in some cases, quite as steep and nasty as has been over the past probably 5 years. It's probably been 4 or 5 years of very tough times for the junior resources sector as a general rule. So I've stolen this slide from my friend Paul Bennett at Medallion Metals. It just shows the change in market caps of a number of WA gold developers over the last 18 odd months. You can see Black Cat and Nika Metal, Brightstar, Medallion, and Astral Resources there. And you can see some of them, have had at least 10 bagger change in market caps. That's not all just change in share price, because, most of these companies have raised reasonable licks of cash to augment their, the size of their market cap. But these companies are all typically in that valley of death zone in the Lassonde curve. And you can see that their valuations have changed significantly. So going from situations where their market cap in general was substantially less than the capital that they needed to raise to get into production. In many cases, their market caps now is substantially more than the capital that they need to raise to get into production. And that's a really virtuous circle or spiral that the market will then believe that they've got much better chance of getting into production, and their share price will go even higher. This is another way of looking at it just quickly, data from Austex. You can see, if you look at the last 12 months, this is market caps broken up by quartile. You can see over the last 12 months that the largest companies, which are generally the producers, have done the best, and the smallest companies have done the worst. But if you look at the last month or the last 3 months, the small companies are actually catching up. That sort of reflects perhaps that real bottom end of the Lassonde curve moving up slightly. But it also, to me, shows that, there's still quite a bit of potential value to be had in looking at the explorers. And we're going to hear about a couple from Rob. But Rob, maybe just to throw a question at you in respect of Musgrave and the Lassonde curve. Musgrave Minerals got taken over while it was in that pre-production phase. But you'd done a lot of work in that feasibility, permitting stage of things, which doesn't attract the market. How do you see that Lassonde curve, from your experience at Musgrave?
John, it's a good question. I think it's about news flow. So if you can continue that news flow, I'm an explorationist, so I love discovery. I love being out there drilling the holes. And so I think if we can continue as a company to try and keep the market excited while we're doing the mundane work that we need to do to de-risk projects, so to keep a little bit of exploration going during that period. It's
Yeah.
sometimes difficult. It's a bit easier in the market today because there's more capital available, but in a really tight market, that is very difficult to do because every single cent is really important for the development process. So it's a little bit easier now. The other thing I think we're seeing, I agree with you that that valley of death has come up. It's still a bit of a flat spot, but there's probably a more chance in the current boom that there's more M&A activity in that time because the larger corporates also know that it's difficult for those in the development space to actually get, significant share price movement. So they're sort of stuck.
Mm.
The bigger companies can take a bit of a ping at that in that space at that time.
Yeah, interesting. You've got to sort of, with one hand, show the market that you're still exploring, and almost surreptitiously keep on with the more boring stuff.
Yeah, correct.
Just quickly before we hand over to you, Rob, just talk about the next webinar. We've got something pretty different. We've got a Canadian geologist, Galen McNamara, who might not be well known to the Aussie audience, but he's been very successful, involved in the very high grade Arrow uranium discovery in Saskatchewan in the famous Athabasca Basin. So looking forward to hearing from Galen. That'll be right at the end of October on the 31st. Okay, so I'm just going to hand over to you, Rob, to dive into giving us the good oil on how you did it through your career.
Thanks, John. So just a quick outline. I'll run through relatively quickly, leaving time for questions at the end, but about a 35-year career. I'm 58 years old. Started at Norseman with Western Mining, CNGC at the time. Great opportunity, really structurally controlled ore body. Um, that was with Western Mining. Obviously, Western Mining then had expanded opportunities. I did 4 years in diamond exploration, not that common for geologists, and then a lot of gold and a lot of nickel. After 19 years, after 17 years with Western, over by BHP, and then joined the junior space. 4 years in uranium, more time in gold, um, and then the IPO of Musgrave Minerals, managing director there for 12 years before the takeover. And there were some ups and downs in that process as well. So talk to you about creating value when you know what you've got, some key lessons. And at the moment, I'm a non-executive director with Caprice, Future Battery Minerals, and Horizon, and also doing a little bit of private stuff on the side. Early career. It's not all beer and Skittles out there. Everyone thinks it is. It's hot. There's flies. It's 40 degrees in October. It's 50 in January. It's tough. You can see the Norseman photo there, early stage. Allowed to wear shorts. Those periods are gone. Free dress as well, almost in those years. Companies didn't want to buy your shirts. Uh, then obviously calling from Mount Amaru, Central Desert, small local community, Aboriginal community, less than sort of 100 people. That's in the Central Australia, so that's where Nebo-Babel discovery is. And then a lot of periods of time getting bogged. Uh, I think I've been bogged more times than I can count, and sometimes they're a good thing, and because you're getting out and about and just trying to get your job done. But other times I'll be being bogged and slept in the vehicle overnight. No comms in those days, so you're wrapping yourself in newspaper because days are warm, nights are cold, and it's difficult to get unbogged when it's pitch black. Remote Australia, amazing, absolutely amazing place to work. Not so great in the middle of summer, but the rest, the other 9 months of the year, it's fantastic. So lots of interaction with local communities. Again, and it's a very different perspective when you're out there in the local communities and people who are working and living off the land. Again, bogged. Um, eating witchery grubs. Effectively they taste like boiled egg or unboiled egg, raw egg, really. Um, it's just the psychological process of getting them in your mouth that's the hardest bit. Um, and then the Nebo-Babel discovery. Effectively, what you can see in that top left-hand photo is the totality of the gossanet surface. That's it. And this is over, 6 square kilometers. So that the identification of that gossan, there's already a geochem anomaly that was sort of 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. The night before, bucketed down with rain, again, bogged. Um, but everyone else said, we're not going out because we know we're going to have to, you know, pull you out, Rob. So, you know, the beauty of going out straight after the rain is all the dust is washed away. So it might be the only chance you get to see that tiny little bit of malachite is when that dust is washed away. So I was out, identified that gossan, and that really led to the discovery of Nebo-Babel. Obviously, there was geophysics involved, and that was key. And there was lots of arguments between geologists and geophysics at the time, Andrew Boyd, about, well, the gossan's here, but the EM anomaly is actually 400 meters that way. You know, might have one chance of drilling this. Which one are we going to drill? And that's the excitement. You can see that bottom left-hand photo there. Started the hole with RC at Nebo. Um, yeah, you're covered in dirt. That's the sulfide that's coming up. You can smell it. And then we went straight from RC. We hit water. We're just at the top of the ore body. Effectively, the hole collapsed. So you're 1 meter in, the hole collapsed, and you're thinking, oh shit, you know, and you're trying to get through. You spent the next 4 hours trying to reopen that hole and trying to get through it with the drill rig. Luckily, we had a universal rig, which was pre-planned, so we spent 3 hours shifting the rig over to diamond, and the next morning they diamond core, and you know, first tray of core, bottom right-hand photo, you know, massive breccia sulfide. So an amazing experience. These type of opportunities don't come around very often, and I think if you're a geologist out there and you ever get a chance to drill out an ore body, take it. One thing, it's always a team effort. Talk about discovering the gossan, but without that, there's a lot of project gen work in the background. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of negotiation to get onto the ground. Geophysics, critically important in nickel work. Andrew Boyd, fantastic geologist. Fantastic geophysicist. John Horonsky, everyone probably heard of those. John, very key in identifying the opportunity. Photo there in the bottom middle. John and I, prior to when we first pegged the first hole, you can see what it looked like at Nebo at surface. It's just sand. There's not much here. So you are relying in some areas on geophysics. The gossan was at Babel, which was another 2 kilometers further over to the west. And then the value. So Nebo-Babel at the moment held again by BHP on care and maintenance, but it's over 1 million tons of nickel metal, over 1 million tons of copper metal, relatively low grade. But discovery in 2000 added roughly around 200 million to WMC's market cap at the time with a single hole discovery. And that's over a sort of a 4.3 billion, 2005. In 2014, it went through with BHP for nearly 10 years there, and I stayed on the project for a period of that. And then BHP sold it in dire nickel days for $250,000, plus royalty and a $10 million production payment. Cassini bought that. They did very well out of it. I was just started up with Musgrave Minerals, so I'd been with Musgrave Minerals as MD for a little while. Missed out on that transaction. I think we missed out on that transaction by asking too many questions about liability. So, lessons learnt. If you want something, just take it. Deal with the detail later. Oz Minerals bought that off Cassini. 30% stake for 68 mil. They had earned in for the rest of that component. Our transaction for 100%. So we're back to that initial value almost. And then Oz Minerals taken out by BHP, and in that acquisition, it had $1.2 billion on the books for the value of Nebo-Babel. And unfortunately, with nickel price in the doldrums, it's now back on care and maintenance. Lessons learned: value is variable. It changes over time. If you have the strength and willpower, it's tough to do though. It's hard to get support when your commodity is in the doldrums. So, acquisition lessons: you need to be flexible and regularly. Know the market. Again, it's always cyclical. Survive the tough times, and they're always tough times. People don't tell you they're not, but I mean, we're in a gold boom. Who knows what it will be in 4 years' time? But we all know what it was like 4 years ago, and it was tough. risk reward. Sometimes you need to assess yourself and do it regularly. Missed out on that West Musgrave transaction by being a little bit risk adverse regarding liability. And you know, sometimes your personal life matches with your decide to buy a motorbike, get a motorcycle license. Went to Nepal with a couple of mates and rode around and reassessed my life risk assessments. There we went 6 months after a large landslide. That's a bus smashed up on the corner. The cliff drop off to the left-hand edge, no railings, about 200 meters down to the other half of the bus. So yeah, so but successful explorers increase their probability of success. Everyone says, "Oh, Rob, you're lucky, you're lucky." Absolutely, I've been lucky. I've been lucky my whole career, but you do have to try and improve your probability of being lucky. Q Gold. So we picked up the Q Gold project from Silver Lake in 2015. Gold was at $1,200 Aussie. So mines were shutting down everywhere. Everyone was getting rid of their the non-core assets, low value stuff. This was a very small resource, you know, 70,000 ounces over multiple deposits in a well-known district. But there was opportunity. We saw opportunity there. Thin clay cover over many areas, and not a lot of exploration in some of the areas that we thought had prospectivity. We built the resource to 12 million tons at 2.3, nearly a million ounces. But again, low acquisition cost, anti-cyclical in the market. Break of day initial resource. But what changed the scope of things here was the Starlight discovery. We were sort of flat tracking. If you sit around that 400, 500,000 ounce mark in a market, you're not standalone, and not a great bull gold market. You're sort of flat tracking, so you need to find a way to get out of that process and that position in the market. It's quite a difficult decision to do some of the things. People think it's really straightforward and easy. Effectively, you're turning the drill rig around. You're turning it 90 degrees and drilling perpendicular to what you thought was controlling the mineralization. So the initial resource, we had an anomaly. This is that you can see the red blob on the left. So there was one or two intersections there that had a 30-meter wide zone. Everything else was quite narrow in this space at less than 5 meters. So there are a number of options for this. Your bifurcations, are there linking structures? Is it a large-scale boot-on? Or had we previously drilled parallel to the main lodes? And so some of the other intersections weren't going to be 5 meters, they were going to be 1 meter. So the risk, if you go back and test this and turn the rig around, is you could halve your existing resource base. And so it's not a straightforward decision always to say, just turn the rig around and test it, because if you do and you get it wrong, you got half the resource. If you do it and you get it right and you grow your knowledge base, suddenly, we did that. Good, just high level discussions between Glenn Martin, the exploration manager, and myself, and saying, do we do this? Do we not do this? And what are the opportunities here? And we went through all those case scenarios. Is it a bifurcation? Is it a link structure? Is it a boot? And we decided, let's bite the bullet and let's do it. And we turned the rig around. The first hole, I think, was 45 meters at 11, with two significant intersections in it, 11 at 14 and 23 at 16. So that suggested there were two lodes, and we'd hit the point right where those lodes are coming together, and is right that at the eastern edge of Starlight. So continued drilling on that same orientation, and then this is what we found. So you can see at Lena here, these load structures that are parallel. So we're confident that in this position, the loads are all parallel to the shear, but you move 200 meters away and all the loads now are not parallel to the shear. They're linking and they're crossing the basalt effectively. So as the shear zones on that north westerly orientation, they come through, they hit the basalt, they flex. The basalt is quite brittle, it shatters, compared to the rocks around it that are more ductile, that bend. And where that obviously rock shatters, that's where you get the mineralization the strongest, and the gold fluids can come up and then deposit the gold. And the difference was you're getting a million tons at 10 grams, effectively added to the ore body and overall, and that makes a huge difference with the economics. The fact that it was only 4 meters below surface is a significant win. You're in a We were within 100 meters of a 100-year-old mine shaft, and this is undiscovered. This would have made a lot of money back in the 1800s, let alone now. Um, so it's really, really critical that you do and you assess your geology, you understand things, and you continue to test your own theses, hypothesis. Gravity was important. The link between gravity and magnetics and understanding which structures have the capacity to extend at depth. And obviously, when your structures are extending at depth, they have the capacity to bring up more fluid at depth. And the fluids at depth are the ones that are bringing that gold through to surface. And you can see again some of the excitement there. The gold in the pan, amazing. Nuggety gold in the district. So um, the nugget on the left-hand image, I'm in the office there. It's over 50 ounces. Today, you know what that value is in today's $5,800 gold price. So that's just sitting in the palm of your hand, and it's amazing how heavy that is. And you watch the movies and they're throwing gold bars in the backpack. That ain't happening. You know, you're not walking out of the mint with those gold bars in your backpack. And again, critical in this process, it's a team effort. Myself, Glenn Martin, John O'Goff came in after Glenn as well and helped make the mosaic discoveries. So in this process, once you make the first discovery and really, really highlights the opportunity, so those cross-cutting structures, turn the rig around, you suddenly look back and assess your regional data and all your data. And normally, in most cases, we did in this case as well, you're making 3 or 4 other discoveries in the next 12 months. And that, so they Starlight led to more discoveries at Mosaic, White Heat, Big Sky. And so it was multiple discoveries additional to that made in the next 12 months. And that's sort of that breakthrough that sometimes you need. And Kelvin geophysics, the interpretation, it's a processing interpretation of that geophysics that can be quite critical as well. And once you know Starlight was there, you're looking for other structures that not necessarily only in that orientation, but can be quite critical. And as mentioned, it's a whole team effort. So there's a big team involved here. Back office is important. You need to have that support. A board critically important. If you don't get alignment, you want a board to be able to question and really challenge each other, but you need alignment. Once you've made decisions, you go forward together on that decision. And Graham, Kelly, John, and Brett were fantastic in that space. Strong governance, really important as well with Trish and Bernard. Back office with Suzanne, and then people on the ground actually doing the hard yards. Marsha, Simon, Matt, Garrett, Adam, Dave, Alessia, Glenn, and many others. So there's lots of people involved in making these discoveries work. So many people in the market don't understand high-grade gold. Um, statisticians don't generally like high-grade gold because there are lots of anomalies. There are lots of high grades that sort of don't fit the stats really well. It doesn't mean the gold's not there. So most miners love high-grade gold because once you put it in the mill, it reconciles really well. And as an example, this is a photo that's been around the Gympie gold mine for a long, long time. So that drill hole had 7.5 meters at 2.9 grams. It is within half a meter of all that visible gold. Um, and that ended up being 3,500 ounces and 7 tons. To put that in perspective, 3,500 ounces of gold and 7 tons at today's price is $19 million, basically in, a couple of buckets, large scale, dozer buckets, but a couple of buckets. Um, and so if you're drilling the drill hole, and you're looking at 7.5 meters at 2.9 grams per ton, it's only $3,500 worth of gold versus 19 million. That's the difference that high-grade gold deposits have the capacity to make in a processing scenario. Financial support, lessons learned here. You need finance. You can't drill holes if you don't have money. That's why the current market is quite good for gold. Capital's available, people can drill holes. Would not be surprised if more discoveries happen in the next 3 years than we've seen in the last decade. because of that money involved in gold space. Um, Perspective's important. Is it permissive? If it's not permissive, don't even touch it. Is it possible? Yeah, let's have a crack. Is it likely? You're jumping at it with everything you got. Keep involved with the economics as you go. There's no point in keeping drilling things out if you think they're not going to make the grade. Engineering's important, environment, access, everything. You've got to link it all through the whole way through your process. Got to be safe. It's important to keep your people safe, and don't never forget that in the process. Um, and that involves license to operate as well. You want to make discoveries where everybody wins. It's not just you that wins. You might get acquired. You want everyone. If you do get acquired, you want the acquirer to win. M&A, if it's successful, is good for every single body that's involved, long term, even the people around you. It might be the companies that make the next M&A. M&A that doesn't work is good for nobody. Teamwork, as I mentioned, teamwork is probably the most important thing in this whole process. Um, Teams make discoveries. It's really rare that individuals do on their own. Work hard. I think that's is exceptionally important. Work hard, reduce your risks, improve your probability of success. Maintain your integrity. You can only lose it. So, it takes one opportunity to lose it, maintain it, and be humble because, one thing I've learned and I try and utilize if I can is I work with people and employ people that are way smarter than me. I try and work with every single person that is smarter than I am because smart people make you look good. What am I doing now? Caprice Resources, gold in the Murchison, future battery minerals, gold and lithium, Coolgardie region, well-known district. Horizon Minerals, a non-exec at all these companies. Gold development, Kalgoorlie region, interesting spot to be in at the moment. If you're interested, you can get in touch. My email's there. Quick note on all three companies. Caprice, we're in the Merchant, so we're actually right next door to the ground that I was managing director of at Musgrave in the red. Caprice ground is a really interesting piece of ground. Really strong results recently. We're getting consistent sort of 10-meter intersections at around that 10 gram per ton. This is one of the targets, Vadrian's. It's just starting to open up as we get down to that 150-meter mark at depth. That strike of that purple zone is about 350 meters. So it's quite a good strike length over really high grade. Um, and what we see here is the opportunity. You're on that critical point where you're understanding the geology, understanding what is starting to control the mineralization. And so we think we're sort of making on the cusp of making that understanding come to fruition with Vadrain's discovery, and then lots of work going forward on testing similar positions we can see within the belt. FBM, it's amazing. You look at some areas, we're 10 k's out of Coolgardie, one of the first gold mining districts in Western Australia. And to find 6 kilometers of prospective shear zone that has had a modest amount of exploration, but it's only 10 k's from the highway, Great Eastern Highway and Coolgardie, and we've just had some intersections, 30 odd meter intersections at a gram and a half in the oxide, starting some fresh rock testing below that as we speak. And that's just one of these targets over a 6 kilometer zone. So this was a project that was really a focus for us for lithium. We've switched to gold in this area now, recognizing that obviously it's a well-known gold district. So in that space, we can see here that this is sort of this 6 kilometer stretch, that blue arrow line. There is some drilling in this area, but not a huge amount and not much through the basement. So I think that in different areas, there are different reasons why things have not happened. We are in a timber reserve, and that has restricted a little bit of access. We've got a process in place here that we can manage that. And obviously, timber was historically important for mining effectively in the goldfields for hundreds of years. So here we've got a number of targets going forward. We're seeing complex regolith gold distribution. So some quite significant leach zones. So that zone is sort of 0 to 30 meters, where a lot of the previous drilling was, you're seeing the leaching of gold. So not much gold at all. And then when you get down below that, we're seeing quite a significant blanket of a higher grade, 1 gram gold. And then the expectation is that it will lead to some fresh rock source. So that's what we're doing at the moment, is testing that and having a better understanding of how that gold is distributed in the regolith and why it is that way. So sometimes these little breakthroughs, it might have been a clay pan up at Q. It's understanding the regolith here and reasons why it wasn't explored. So that gives you a competitive advantage, gets you the opportunity to get in there, and then it's a matter of making those discoveries. Horizon, planning to be an emerging standalone gold producer. We've merged with Poseidon, acquired the Black Swan mill, a nickel mill. So it's a faster and cheaper process to acquire that and convert that to gold than it is to get permitting and everything through for a standalone new opportunity for gold development with a mill. So that hopefully will fast track us through to development. We've got 1.8 million ounces of gold in resources over a number of prospects in that Kalgoorlie region, and the plan is to send all that gold through to a central hub, which will be the Black Swan mill. So the three companies I've been talking to you about are in different zones and different areas, but they all have a strong gold link, and they're different market caps. So from Caprice being an 80 million market cap, Future Battery Minerals about a 30, and Horizon here over 200 million market cap at the moment. But the plan is to get this into development, have a processing hub at Black Swan, and so a really pretty strong resource base to feed that over a 5 to 7 year period, ideally. So mill space is really hard to get hold of in the Kalgoorlie district at the moment. It's not easy to put your feed in other people's mills. So I think having another hub, another mill in this district, with gold prices the way they are, will be a really important process in getting us to that point of production. John, I'll hand it back, but you can visit any of these companies. There's details on the web, details on the ASX, and also working through some private things with a good friend of mine, Andrew Eddowes at Scala Minerals. And the plan is to get that up and running and IPOing in the not too distant future.
Rob, thank you so much. That was fascinating. Some great insights and some pretty interesting things that you're doing now. I think I won't go through it all, but it seems like sometimes taking the risk of getting bogged is not a bad risk to take. So thank you very much. We will move very quickly to Q&A and go to the questions as they came in. Short update on the Caprice drilling campaign. When can we expect the first, I guess, results from the labs?
Yeah, so Caprice, we're out drilling RC at the moment below Vadrian's. That's the starting point for that, and we'll move the rig around on a couple of opportunities at that Island Gold project for Caprice. We're about 3,000 meters into that program, so about a third of the way of the RC. We've got a diamond rig coming not too far away, and air core rigs later in the year. But at the moment, the RC will be the first assays we get back. First batches have been sent to the lab. Lab turnaround at the moment is roughly around that 6-week mark, so probably about 5 weeks from now.
Okay, thank you. Where does a company like Ramelius fit into this equation? I guess that's referring to Lassonde curve. There's a few parts to this. Where do you see the gold prices in 1 to 2 years? I'm going to give that to you, Rob. And do you feel there's a discrepancy between the gold price and junior miners/explorers like Astral and MI6, for example? Take your pick of any of those questions. I might try and chip in as well. Yep.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the gold price. The fundamentals for gold are really strong, and John is probably way across the fundamentals a lot more than I am. But really, interest rates, you're talking about commodity shifts, you're talking about instability within global markets, you're talking about debt, but we're also talking about Donald Trump. Mr. Trump likes to be a bit of a disruptor, so that is generally good for gold. In that space, I can't see gold dropping back to the levels it was over 12 months ago. Gold always sort of fluctuates a little bit. We've had a really strong run in the last probably 2 months, but who knows what the upside could be. Commodities are cyclical. At some point, it will come back, but I think we've got a pretty strong run ahead of us in the shorter term.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Trump, his policies seem to be driving inflation up and wanting to bring interest rates down. And with those two sort of countervailing forces, that's very good for gold. And on top of that, you've got central bank buying or, de-dollarization from central banks like the Chinese central bank. And that's also been underpinning the gold price. And I don't see that fundamental driver disappearing in the near term either. So it does look very positive. Just on other part of that question, I'll talk about Astral because that's in the Lowell portfolio. The share price has moved up reasonably nicely, probably trading at around, a $300 million market cap. But if you put in a gold price to their pre-feasibility study, which is below today's Aussie dollar gold price, you can get an NPV of, 1.5 billion. So it's still trading at 20% or less of its underlying NPV. So there is some very good potential as it does move through, hopefully to development for that value gap to close. And, Rob, you mentioned M&A. That's probably one of the companies that people talk about reasonably frequently as being in the sights of M&A targets. And then a question from Robbie Joseph. This is a good one. If you were to have an educated guess, of course, how many ounces of gold do you see in the Q province that remain undiscovered?
And good question, Robbie. Total province, what time frame are we talking about? Are we talking about, I mean, there's been 130 years of mining there to date, and there's probably been somewhere around that 20 to 30 million ounces. You could probably double that, but depends how long you want to wait, Rob. So you might, does it take 100 years to do that, or does it take 20? But there's a lot more to be discovered, and I think dollars in the ground.
Yeah. And just following up on that from me, what do you think is sort of special about Q? You obviously gone back there with Caprice after Musgrave. Some of it, is it because it's been overlooked, or is it the endowment? Is it the regolith? Anything? Any comments on that?
Probably a couple of comments, John. The simplest one and the one that you probably don't want to hear is the fact I've got limited brain power and I understand the geology there. No, look, a geologist that understands the geology of a region, you're obviously in a step forward, so you don't have to relearn things. So there's an advantage. Everything is competitive advantage. That's probably a little bit of my competitive advantage. So utilize that.
Okay. All right, I think this might be the last one from Jason Beckton. Rob, well done. Known you since Cal days in the early 90s. One question on geo supply as we approach a time where there are more companies than geos. Why are geology faculties shrinking and commerce law faculties bursting to overfull in Australia?
Jace, you and I have spent a fair bit of time in the bush, so and there's not a lot of people that want to do that anymore. Look, I think as with always, we need to do probably more education at the lower levels of age. So we're talking about primary schools, get in, talk about the excitement of geology, of mining, of being out in the bush and promote that side of it. I mean, kids love going fishing, kids love camping, but once you get to that old age, everything's into, your phone, your contacts and your mates. But I think there is a link between that bush, camping, fishing, whatever. If we can continue that on at a really younger age, I think you'll find more people wanting to be interested in getting out there in the bush and then doing geology or doing engineering or those more science-based areas.
Yeah. No, look, it's a pretty special career, as you've shown. So a lot of really interesting challenges. Hopefully we'll see a resurgence in people coming out of school and going into uni and signing up for geology courses. Touch wood. We certainly need it. That's great. I think that wraps up. I will just reiterate about the next Lowell Lodestar Drilling Deeper webinar, which will be 31st of October. We're going to be talking about uranium and discoveries in the Athabasca, in the cold, white wastelands of the Athabasca Basin. So if you would like to pop that in your diary, please do that. But if you're on our mailing list, you'll certainly get a reminder on that one. I'll wrap it up. Rob, some fantastic insights as expected. Really great career. And thank you very much for sharing, some of the learnings that you've acquired along the way in terms of how to make the big discoveries and the really high value discoveries. I guess Nebo-Babel was a really big one, not high value at the moment. Break a Day and Q was smaller, super valuable as Ramelius is proving. at the moment. So well done. Thank you very, very much. And I think we will wrap it up there. So look forward to seeing everyone again at the next webinar.
Thanks, John. Been great.
Cheers, Rob.